Try that next time. That is not what's meant by listening here. Is that okay? It's the strategic listening where the listener is respecting what is it I'm saying. The principals were able to share their experiences. Sharing that experiential knowledge is really important, because often we will make links through shared experiences and sharing of experiences where we won't make links in our thinking in other ways. Where the principals used examples and demonstrations, pointed out options to the teachers. You could try this, you could try that. What might you go about doing? Encouraged risk-taking. Really recognised what the teachers already knew and showed a valuing of that. Really showed a valuing. And in their dialogue, kept coming back to improved instruction. Now, I wouldn't probably be focusing explicitly on improved instruction. I'd be focusing on improved student learning. I'd be really wanting to talk about the children learning better, as a result of the actions the teacher took. So for the principals to be judged to be effective, did those sorts of things. Secondly, in terms of giving feedback, I've listed a number of key aspects. In order to give this feedback, the principal would need to know what went on in the classroom. The principal would need to spend some time in the classroom to be able to give that feedback. One aspect of the feedback that I think is important there is the business of establishing a problem-solving orientation. And that solution-focused orientation is along the lines of, okay, there might have been a learning issue, let's unpack it. Let's get a clear idea of what the real problem is, or what the issue is for the child, or for the group of children. Let's unpack that, and now let's attempt to look at a possible solution procedure. How will we go about working through it? And one key issue that I think is really important in all of this is that we learn to interpret issues and problems in a classroom from a learning teaching perspective, because that's all I can pull handles on, pull levers on. The only things I can manage is how the teaching and the sorts of learning that I'm scaffolding. In terms of promoting professional growth, the principal did the first two, but also encouraged reflective discussions. And so the principal, says to Alistair, there's a teacher down the road from you. Young Yotta's doing this in literacy. Why don't you go and watch? And Yotta, why don't you go and watch Alistair, and so on. So it's really really building a network in the school through the dialogue, a network of support. Lorraine, you were really doing well on vocabulary. Connie, you're doing really well on the meaning-making motor. Why don't you exchange and talk? It's the principal really building those networks in the school to support the learning and the reflective practice. In terms of promoting professional growth, I've mentioned various outcomes of the research in this area. Effective principals use 6 strategies to foster the professional growth. First of all, the principal emphasised the study of learning and teaching. So it's a real focus on that learning and teaching is going to be the means for improving practice in our school. That it's learning and teaching that really will deliver the goods. Secondly, that the principals supported collaboration among teachers. And so there was time for collaborative activities, time for sharing ideas, peer Teamwork was modelled. There was time allocated for that. The principal also developed coaching relationships among the staff. So different staff were able to coach based on their strengths for particular purposes. So the idea of knowledge was distributed and it was shown, it was seen to be distributed through the group. That the principal encouraged and supported the fine-tuning of teaching and supported a range of approaches to allowing the teaching to be modified. Okay, are there any questions about these? Because it would be useful then to say, to what extent are these actually being, in your school, if you were going to evaluate your school in terms of doing this, what at this point would be the extent of instructional leadership in implementing these sorts of interactions? And we developed this instructional leadership questionnaire that actually asks questions about these. Now, we've actually included that. I'd be really keen to get feedback to see where we are across the whole project in terms of instructional leadership. And a second reason for including this is to say this is what research like Blaze and Blazers actually says that school leaders do. Now, the wording on yours might be slightly different from this wording. But, for example, how often has the school leadership team actually helped you to plan how you'll teach the topic you're teaching? So how often have you had dialogue with the leadership team about how you'll teach the topic you're teaching? How often has the leadership team helped you to identify the specific learning goals for your class? Or asked you to encourage you to think creatively about how you're going to teach a particular topic? I'm going to teach earthworms. For example, I'm in David's school, and David has dialogue with me about how I'll teach earthworms creatively. You would, wouldn't you, mate? I don't know how I'd do it. Okay, how often has the principal discussed how you're monitoring student learning and progress through your teaching? So through your teaching, how you're seeing the kids learning and so on. So can you see how there's a number of behaviours here that will, I hope, give you a lens on what instructional leadership looks like. And if you can visualise, a principal doing this in the context of your classroom, this is what people are talking about when they're referring to instructional leadership.